welcome back to Block TV, where it is time for cryptonomics and the trends that might be stirring the crypto market. Today, we pose the question, do global trade wars have an effect over the rise or fall of cryptos? Case in point, last week, President Donald Trump's trade fight with China was commanding headlines and the attention of financial markets. To compound that, a presidential tweet of the end of last week was threatening to impose tariffs on all Mexican goods exported to the U.S. over the border issue, and that is expected to have an effect on this week's trading global markets. We're recording this at the beginning of a Monday, by the way. Now, the prevailing notion was in the past that when global markets go down, cryptos go up. But is that really the case? And to shed more light on that, I'm joined in studio by Block TV's senior correspondent, Asher Westrop-Evans. Asher, let's start actually with the trade wars.
Okay, so let's see where we stand right now. As of late April, we saw an uptick in a series of retorts back and forth between China and the US, now between Mexico and the United States, and what looked like, what started April looked like it was going to be a month where perhaps we might see some breakthroughs coming through when it came to these trade wars. Didn't eventuate. In fact, the situation got considerably worse. Tariffs have gone up around the board, and so now the market is responding in kind.
Right.
So if we take a look, we can see in late April that reflected in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We can see there that downtrend pointed out there, a point at which we reached the local high and started heading back down. After we started 2019, there'd been that dip at the end of late last year, but we'd seen the uptrend, and then as this trade war sort of accelerated, and so the situation sort of
headlines of trade wars accelerate, and show that to me on the chart.
Exactly, and the downtrend really started there. That's very in line with April. So if we now take a look at the corresponding Bitcoin daily chart, we see that at that same time, that's a corresponding date, we start seeing the big upswing occurring, the real parabolic move. There had been already positive moves before, but so that early April accumulator, that big whale that bought up.
I was about to say, because we saw the uptick at the crypto market around April 2nd.
Exactly.
At the beginning of the month.
But you see right there was that big sort of parabolic move that occurred right around there, a bit more organic than some of the stuff we'd seen earlier. Definitely part of an upward trend that already existing, but really accelerated. So the question is correlation or causation. Those things as yet hard to prove, but if we take a look at some of the rhetoric that's been going around at the moment, so of course we have to bring in, we talk trade war, Donald Trump tweets, of course, have to come into the mix. So this is what was happening just as of yesterday, Trump tweeting out, and I quote,
Please.
People have been saying for years that we should talk to Mexico. The problem is that Mexico is an abuser of the United States, talking but never giving. It has been this way for decades. Either they stop the invasion of our country by drug dealers, cartels, human traffickers, coyotes,
I'm going to stop you for a second because I have to remind users, viewers, that ultimately Donald Trump is, after all, the man who launched his campaign for presidency with two things: coming down an escalator and calling Mexicans rapists.
He certainly did. So
and it has.
It does. And that compounding with the tariffs he's putting in play, because as he states at the end of this, so jobs that may have been foolishly allowed to move south of the border will be brought back to the United States through taxation, in brackets, tariffs. So he is laying out there that that is the planned attack. That is exactly what the United States is going to do towards Mexico, and that's causing markets to plummet.
And how is it? Because that announcement, I think it was Thursday evening, that tweet, sorry, not announcement of that, I believe he said, I'm about to smack 5% worth of tariffs on all goods coming in.
Yeah, so 5% on tariffs coming into place on June 10, and then and ramping up if there's no accord reached, if things continue as threatened, up till October when it would hit 25%.
Now, global markets reacted how? Because this happens at the end of last week.
Exactly. So we saw the Dow drop over 300 points on Friday, massive fall, and that's exactly what the point here that we're seeing, that we see those markets fall and we see people seek for safe haven stores of value. Now, what are the safe haven stores of value? It's something we deal with often on Block TV.
Gold is one.
Gold is a classic. Silver, commodities as a whole tend to see a bit of a bump when this occurs. The US dollar itself, of course, a safe haven place for people to store value. And now, of course, there are alternatives being offered to the market. That is where Bitcoin comes into play. That is where the cryptocurrency markets as a whole come into play as a means of storing value, as a means of trading value equitably even when tariffs are in place. Because let's remember that in accordance with US law, ever since back in the early 2000s with the Patriot Act, the US has had the right to follow transactions and limit transactions being put in place in US dollars around the world.
Compliments of 9/11.
Exactly. case, of course, with the crypto markets, which the legislation and regulation is a little less.
And taking its time.
Good.
No, it's fascinating. So I'm wondering with you, what is? Well, first of all, we can't draw. Let's start from this. We cannot draw. We can't say factually, yes, this definitely shows that there is a correlation, but there is an effect. There's some sort of an effect there.
We can say there's a correlation, but not a causation. We cannot say that there is a marketplace that's certainly done, because there's not enough time to really test that. Bitcoin hasn't really existed. Cryptocurrencies as a whole haven't really existed throughout a financial crisis to really test what happens there. And as we've seen, the market's maturing, the market's changing, adapting, and of course, to know, even if it had been through a financial crisis in the past, which it was on the edge of the global financial crisis.
And you said something very true. I mean, at the end of the day, the last big financial crisis that would have been the use case scenario for Bitcoin was in its inception in 2008.
It was in its infancy when it's getting off the ground.
Exactly. Was created.
At the point at which market liquidity is not really relevant. It was so illiquid that it's to be relevant to the way the markets moved. Nowadays, it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Use case, so that was use case scenario apropos markets crashing, but the store of value is the million-dollar question. Because gold has been a store of value historically, because people thought, and I'm dumbifying it right now, but in the event of an apocalypse, pardon me, it is Monday. In the event of an apocalypse, gold will hold.
Exactly.
Which, there are many who argue. There was a Yale professor, according to a CCN report about a few months ago, saying that Bitcoin's claim to be a store of value is very problematic. In the event of an apocalypse, I won't argue that Bitcoin will last.
No,
right?
certainly, maybe not global apocalypse, though. I got to ask, I mean, when we come to global apocalypse, maybe holding on to grain would be a more useful store of value. So perhaps that's not what we should be aiming for in the market system.
Right.
I mean, gold is great and all, but you can't really eat it. It's not actually very useful.
No, good point.
Each to their own. But more importantly, I think is, you raise a good point there in the sense that gold is a great store of value because it lasts. It's tangible, it's very solid, the supply is relatively consistent. Now, Bitcoin has a lot of those features, but one thing Bitcoin does have, as it's so new as a market, is the volatility, that mass volatility that makes it very exciting to speculators, people who want to jump in and see what happens and bring. When you're talking about store of value, it's tricky because
how can a store of value be so volatile?
Right,
That's
exactly.
the first thing that comes to mind.
That being said, when we saw the European financial crisis early in the decade, when we saw Brexit occur, there were bumps in Bitcoin, there were bumps in cryptocurrency markets, short-lived perhaps at the time, of people going, you know what? I don't trust my local currency, my local fiat anymore as much as I used to.
And there's
I'm
this thing
concerned
now,
about the market, I'm concerned where the pound will go, I'm concerned where the FTSE will go, etc. So maybe I will place the money into Bitcoin.
The money into digital, into
Digital
cryptocurrencies,
assets, yeah.
Exactly. Same though, you said, you remind me of, before we started talking, also in Greece, when we were on the verge of, right?
Greece, Portugal, Spain,
exactly.
when they were all on their absolute worst parts of their economic crisis, at the point at which governments were going into savings accounts and saying, look, we need to bail out the banks and we're going to take right here. People are going, well, I certainly don't want that to happen. How can I store my money? Do I do a run on the bank and put it under my mattress? Well, that doesn't seem particularly safe either. People aren't so eager on that. Where could I put it? Into a digital asset that can transfer around the world, that I can move across the world, and is effectively untrackable and uncontrollable by any one particular government.
But as you mentioned, drawing the direct correlation between the two, the demise of global markets and the rise of crypto, too early to tell. And I think you're right, because Bitcoin itself, or the inception of cryptocurrencies, is only 10 years old. But it's
too early to tell. But the point I think to take away from this is to watch very closely, because there are many analysts right now, early days to be sure, but it's saying if this global trade war continues, we could start seeing some serious recession effects happening around the world. And if we see that occurring, will crypto digital assets really start to rise, really start to grow? If we see that correlation play out, then maybe that store of value has been achieved.
I was about to say time will tell, but I think the tweet will tell.
Exactly.
Asher Westrop Evans, thank you for always getting my references.
My pleasure.
Brilliant. That was Cryptonomics with a close